Let's talk about 1857. This was the year a fire was lit in India. It was a year of incredible defiance, of shocking bloodshed, and a rebellion so huge it would shake the mighty British Empire to its very core and really change the course of history forever. We're going to dive into how this all went down and why even today, people still debate what it all meant. So let's set the scene. Picture this. It's the morning of May 11th, 1857. We're in the city of Delhi, the old, grand capital of the Mughal Empire, and it's about to become the absolute epicenter of a political earthquake. And this is the moment it all just blows up. A group of Indian soldiers, they were called Sepoys, they show up at the gates of Delhi's famous Red Fort. They'd been riding all night from a town called Meerut, where they had just turned on their British officers. And now they're taking their fight to the symbolic heart of India. And their goal? It was crystal clear. They declared war on the Firungis. That's a word for foreigners that, by this point, was dripping with contempt. They were there to end the rule of the British East India Company, period. This wasn't some small protest. This was an all-out declaration of war. But you know, a rebellion, it needs a face, a symbol to rally behind. So the Sepoys, they forced their way into the palace and they proclaimed the old and, frankly, very reluctant Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, as their leader. His blessing, even though he didn't really want to give it, was the crucial piece that turned a soldier's mutiny into a potentially nationwide uprising.
Okay, so how on earth did things get to this point? What was it that turned a local mutiny into this massive, sprawling rebellion? Well, the answer isn't just one thing. It's in years and years of anger that had been simmering right below the surface.
Think of it like this. India in the mid-1800s was basically a powder keg just waiting for a spark. You had ruling families who'd been pushed aside and lost their power. You had the sepoys who were convinced the British were trying to destroy their religion. You had peasants and landowners just getting crushed by impossible taxes. Just about every part of society had a major grievance. It was a perfect storm of discontent. And listen to this. This is a personal account from a sepoy named Sitaram Pandey, and it really hits home. For him, when the British took over the kingdom of Oudh, it wasn't just some political chess move. No, it was a deep, personal betrayal. For soldiers from that area, it was all the proof they needed that these foreigners couldn't be trusted. And just so we're clear on that word, Firangi, it's a Persian term that means foreigner, but by 1857, it was not a neutral word. It was loaded. It was packed with resentment and defiance, a way of labeling the British as outsiders who had overstayed their welcome. All right, so the spark was lit in Meerut and Delhi. Now we're going to see how that spark turned into an absolute wildfire, just spreading like crazy across northern India, transforming this whole thing from a mutiny into a full-blown rebellion. Once the news got out that Delhi had been taken, that was it. It was a total game changer. It gave people a powerful symbol, right? A real alternative to British rule. Inspired by this, you had regiment after regiment of sepoys mutinying, and they all started marching toward Delhi to join the fight. And this thing wasn't just happening in Delhi. Nope. All across the plains of northern India, local leaders started stepping up. In Kanpur, you had Nana Sahib. In Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal. The legendary Rani Lakshmibai led the fight in Jhansi. All these different leaders rose to the occasion, giving the revolt a really diverse and widespread command structure. Take a look at this guy, Kumar Singh. He's such a perfect example of how diverse this rebellion was. He wasn't some young, hot-headed soldier. He was an elderly zemindar, a traditional landlord from Bihar. But he joined the fight and became one of its best military commanders, which just goes to show you that this was a fight that crossed all lines of age and social class. Okay, but the British East India Company, they were not just going to roll over and let this happen. This was an existential threat to them, and they were about to unleash the full, terrifying might of their empire to strike back and crush this rebellion. So the company's response? It was huge. They brought in everything they had. Reinforcements sailed all the way from Britain. They passed new laws so they could punish rebels quickly and brutally. And then they started a massive military campaign to retake every single rebel stronghold, one city at a time. And the suppression, it was incredibly violent. Just look at this image. These are the ruins of Sikandar Bagh in Lucknow. Over 2,000 rebel soldiers were killed right here in one of the deadliest, most brutal fights of the entire war. It's just a stark, haunting reminder of the terrible, terrible cost of this conflict. And this wasn't a quick fight. It was a long, bloody slog for the British to regain control. As you can see here, even after they retook Delhi in late 1857, the war was far, far from over. It took, though, almost 2 more years of just relentless, brutal fighting to finally stamp out the uprising. Key leaders like Rani Lakshmi fell in battle, until finally by 1859, the British were back in control.
So what about the emperor? The man who was kind of dragged into this whole thing? Well, Bahadur Shah Zafar was captured, he was put on trial for treason and sentenced to life in prison. He and his wife were shipped off to Rangoon, which is in modern-day Myanmar, and he died there, in jail, in 1862. Just a lonely, tragic end for the last emperor of a dynasty that had ruled for more than 300 years.
So, the fighting's over, the rebellion is crushed, but the story doesn't end there. Not even close. The British may have won the war, but they knew the old way of doing things was finished. The aftermath of 1857 was going to kick off a totally new era, the beginning of the British Raj.
This right here, this slide, shows you the single biggest change. Before 1857, India was run by a corporation, the East India Company. After 1858, forget that. The British Parliament stepped in, dissolved the company, and the British Crown, the government itself, took direct control. A whole new political reality had begun.
And to make absolutely sure something like this never, ever happened again, the British completely rewired how they ruled India. They slashed the number of Indian soldiers in the army. They started recruiting from so-called martial races like Gurkhas and Sikhs, groups who had mostly stayed loyal. They went after the Muslim population, who they blamed for the whole thing, and took their land. And they made a promise to all the local princes: your kingdoms are safe. These policies would define British rule for the next 90 years. And that leaves us with the big question, the one historians still argue about today. What exactly was this event in 1857? Was it simply a failed mutiny by a bunch of angry soldiers? Or was it something much, much bigger, the first true war of Indian independence? The way we answer that question really defines how we see not just this conflict, but the entire history of modern India that came after it.